subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Thank you so much to all our subscribers who have joined this interaction. It really is important, like the whatever little amount that you choose to give to the print, because that is the only way that reporters like me can be on ground and bring you stories from across the country. And I'm currently in Shillong right now. A little bit of a heads up, the place where I'm staying at, the Wi-Fi is not the greatest. So there may be like a bit of an audio video lag. So please bear with me. And this is the latest episode in what is our newest exclusive feature for subscribers only. It's called Reporters Direct, where it provides a platform for our readers to speak with reporters like me in case you guys have any questions or doubts, or tips to give about perhaps how how to go about a story, or if you want to know how a reporter goes to an unknown part of the country, speaks to people not known, and how we establish that connection, and how we speak to those in the authority, how to get a scoop, and how stories are reported. Most importantly, how the pandemic has been for us as reporters, how we do those stories, and health has suddenly become a really important beat. So all of us are really brushing up on those skills. So, how we have been covering the various aspects of, how COVID has impacted lives across the country and the issues we face there. So Reporters Direct is our latest feature in that. And we hope to, give you a bit of an insight into how we reporters function, and how we go about bringing our stories that you have been so kind to read and share. So just a little bit of an introduction about me and the work I do. My name is Taran Deol. I am a reporter at The Print. I actually cover civil aviation. However, like life has been upended for so many people across the country. I have spent about the better half of the past 18 months or so just covering coronavirus, the outbreak, how it has impacted our healthcare system, the state's response to that, the issues that people are facing in accessing healthcare, what happens when they're not able to do that, and stuff like that. So I have traveled extensively across the country. I've been to Punjab, I went to Madhya Pradesh, several parts in Madhya Pradesh, traveled across districts in Punjab as well. I also covered COVID outbreak in Meerut, in Dehradun and adjoining areas, and of course Delhi and the nearby areas as well, bringing you stories about how the healthcare structure, the healthcare infrastructure is crumbling, and how people are being just left to die on the streets, essentially, as you must have seen across several other news channels as well. Print, in fact, sent quite a lot of reporters out on assignment in several states, and we have our subscribers to thank for that, because without your support, that really would not have been possible. Coming back to a little bit about the work I have done, I have mostly done COVID coverage. That is where my experience has been. However, and a little bit of civil aviation as well. Currently, I am in Shillong, the capital of Meghalaya. Just to give you a bit of a brief about why I'm here, the stories I'm covering. So on 13th of August, a former militant, a retired militant who had surrendered to the government about two and a half years ago in 2018, Chesterfield, thank you. He was killed during a police raid at his house. And that has since, he was linked to some blasts, IED blasts that happened in Shillong and adjoining areas. And his killing and the way he was killed has triggered a bit of an anger among the people here. And on 15th August, which also happens to be Independence Day, during his funeral procession, things got a little bit violent in Shillong, as people were supporting, or just paying their respect to the former militant. There was vandalism, there was arson, there was stone pelting in Shillong, and this is a city that has been largely peaceful since its inception, or at least in the past 15 to 20 years. So that is what I'm here for. I'm in Shillong. I'm here to cover that instance. what happened there, what the people are feeling, what the state is doing, what the action will be taken. I also spoke with the Chief Minister, Mr. Conrad Sangma. That interview is available on our YouTube channel, so please do go ahead and watch that. Also talk to the police, talk to the family members, talk to the villagers here, his neighbors, essentially just getting a bit of an understanding of what the environment is like in Shillong right now, and what the status of militancy is. So that is the story that I'm here to cover in Shillong. I have a list of a couple of questions that some of our subscribers asked. Just a bit of a disclaimer, I'm a reporter. I am no expert in Northeast politics or anything. In fact, this is my first time in Northeast as well. But I will still try to answer the questions I have, the question that you have, to the best of my abilities. So the first question is by Mr. Gautam Singh. He has asked whether, the CAA NRC that the Modi government brought in, does that have any link to what is, to the unrest in Meghalaya? And also the second part to his question, where he asked whether, whether the Modi government can use the northeastern states in the upcoming 2024 elections, were they to lose some seats in the Hindi heartland. So I will try to answer your questions. For the first one, the unrest which is primarily in Shillong right now, it's not so much in the other parts, is about militancy. And there were 2 IED blasts that took place, one on 14th of July in a police reserve, and another one on 10th of August in a crowded market in Shillong. While nobody was hurt, 2 or 3 people were injured, and some property damage did happen. So the unrest and the uneasiness is essentially limited to the capital of Shillong, and it doesn't have much to do with CAA NRC per se. Having said that, there were protests in the state in early 2020, and much like rest of India, it wasn't any different here, even though the government has said that 6 scheduled areas will be exempted from CAA NRC, and a majority of Meghalaya falls under that. Despite that, there is, a little bit of distrust and a little bit of dissatisfaction, if you could say that, in the people with the government. So perhaps that is why there was a little bit of unrest. But about what is happening currently in Shillong, that is limited to militancy and cases of blasts. And basically, more importantly, it's actually about how the police handled it. Many have alleged this to be a fake encounter, and just to bump him off, it was done. It wasn't. They could have easily arrested Cherish Tafeel. Thank you. He had surrendered to the Indian government in 2018. He was overground. He was leading a normal life, and many people are essentially upset with how the police cracked down on this, and that is where their dissatisfaction, that is where this sentiment stems from. About the upcoming 2024 elections, whether the Modi Shah government can look at the Northeast to probably compensate for seats they would lose in the Hindi heartland, that would be difficult for any party to do, purely because the number of seats in a Hindi heartland state, say Uttar Pradesh, is far more than any particular northeastern state. So that is a bit of it's a number game, and that it will be difficult for any party, not just BJP, to try to make up for what they lose in the Hindi heartland in Northeast. And also, if BJP is to make a good or increase their footprint in Northeast, they need to really actively work with regional parties. So that is my answer. There is another question from Mr. Sampson. He has asked if there is popular support for the rebels. Now, I'm assuming this is about what is happening in Shillong. Like I said, people are really just angry with how the police and the state have responded to this entire incident. You know, everyone is saying the police went to his house in the dead of the night at 3 a.m. And they shot him dead. And it has really rubbed people off the wrong way, you know, like everybody is saying that, you know, they could have perhaps gone to his house in the day, arrested him, interrogated him, questioned him as things should have been. That they went so late at night, it doesn't paint a pretty picture. It doesn't make the police look, it makes them look a little at fault, if I could say that. So about support for rebels, so I'll just give you a little bit of background about Cherish Tafil. Thank you. He was 54 years old. He is the founding general secretary of HNLC. It's a separatist outfit in Meghalaya, and it was really at its peak in the late 90s, perhaps even early 2000s. But around 2003, 2004, the then government really cracked down on, separatist outfits. And the only way for these outfits to function is, and to remain relevant and to remain influential, is if they have funding. And when the government then cracked down on these outfits, they really lost out on the funding. And with the funding, they lost out on their influence as well. So while there was a lot of violence in Meghalaya around late 90s, early 2000s. In the past 10 to 15 years, it has been a fairly peaceful environment in terms of militancy. However, there have been, certain Cherish Tafil, thank you. In fact, while he was an active member of HNLC, he was operating out of Bangladesh, but he surrendered to the Indian government in around 2018. The family maintains that he retired citing ill health. And citing ill health, right? So he retired in 2018, and he was leading. People say that he was leading largely a peaceful life, and he was overground. Everybody knows where he stays and everything. But in the last couple of months, like I said, there was a blast in July. There was another blast in August. There have been some instances, and both of these blasts have been claimed by the current General Secretary of HNLC, who is also based in Bangladesh. Nobody knows the real name. They use an alias. So there are small incidents of these blasts and everything, but to call it militancy again is, I think it'd be a bit of a stretch. In fact, in an interview that I had with the Chief Minister Conrad Sangma, he even said that it's more of an extortion racket at this point because they don't have the funding that they used to. So about support for the rebels, I think the support essentially came in after the police behaved the way they did. So that is my answer for you. Vishwanath, I believe Mr. Vishwanath has asked another question. If he was leading a normal life as per you, who is on ground, why did the police confront him in the first place? There is no smoke without fire. The police confronted him because they said that they had evidence against him, linking him to the blasts that happened in July and August. So that is the reason why they went to arrest him. Also, the state says that the intention was always to arrest him. Things just went. An unfortunate incident, as the chief minister said, took place when he was shot dead. So that is the reason why the police went to pick him up. Moving on to my next question by Rashi Chandola. Has the unrest in Mizoram and Assam also contributed to the current situation in Meghalaya? So the Assam-Mizoram border, the issue, as you must have read, is a border issue. And what is happening in Meghalaya right now is not so much a border issue, but more about militancy, like I said. So there is no direct connection between the two as such. That being said, there have been, instances of unrest in the Northeast in the past couple of months. They may not be directly linked, but yes, there have been instances of unrest, of a little bit of tension. In fact, there was between Meghalaya and Assam as well, there were some border tensions. Although Chief Minister Conrad Sangma said that, the two states are moving forward in a positive note, despite, and they may not agree on everything. They hope to solve the issues in a more amicable manner. So to say that if what is happening in Assam and Mizoram is linked to what is happening in Meghalaya right now, I don't think there is a direct link between the two as such. So yeah, I mean, these are pretty much the questions that our subscribers had for me, that I could answer beforehand. If any of the viewers watching right now, if you have any more questions, please feel free to ask. I did, I've spent a lot of time covering COVID on ground in several states. So if you have any questions about how that happened, the issues I faced, or how I went about a particular story, we could discuss that as well. So if any viewer has any question about the COVID outbreak and how that was managed, I can speak about that as well. I believe Mr. Arijit Chakravarti has a question. Why is Northeast escalating in violence now? Why is a bit of a difficult question to answer. I'm no expert here. I'm just a reporter. Is it due to BJP? That's I don't know if that's a fair link or a connection to make. I don't know if we have any information about that. In Meghalaya also, BJP just has two MLAs. I can only speak about Meghalaya because that is a state that I have been reporting from. It's just, like I said, it's been a largely peaceful city, and just like, small incidents here and there in the past. And essentially how the police have handled it is what is really triggering a little bit of a dissatisfaction and anger in the people. So, it's we can't even say if militancy is back in Meghalaya as such, because that is again, it's a very long argument to make. But yeah, I'm sorry, I won't be able to answer as to why violence is rising in Northeast. It's just to say that these are one-off incidents, at least in Meghalaya right now, and several people in the administration and the authorities say that hopefully it will be peaceful soon. In fact, people of Maulai, which is the region that Cherish to Feel Thank You belongs to, they also hope for peace. They also hope for some justice to be brought to the family. So yeah, hopefully this will just, a judicial inquiry has been set up in this. It'll be headed by the Meghalaya Human Rights Commission chair, a retired judge, so which has been given a deadline of 3 months. So hopefully that will put an end to this whole incident. By Rashi, why is no one talking about COVID anymore? Aren't we in the middle of a third wave right now? Also, why are majority of cases coming from southern states while Up and Bihar seem to be largely unaffected? That is a very important question. We should not stop talking about COVID because we did a similar thing right before the second wave hit, and we know how badly that really impacted everybody. It crumbled our healthcare system in a way that nobody, thought it would. People were standing outside hospitals, looking for beds. Oxygen shortage was a real issue. And that is when people were struggling to live. Even in deaths, there was no dignity because, there was no places to bury people. There was not enough wood to burn them. So Rashi, you are right. We should not stop talking about COVID, absolutely. And about southern states having more cases than those in the north of India, Bihar and upwards. I think it has, I can instances about Kerala and Maharashtra specifically. These are two states that test a lot. So if you test more cases will show up. That is not so much, that hasn't been the case for northern states, especially, Delhi has not been testing enough, Uttar Pradesh hasn't been testing enough. So maybe that is could be another reason why, as to it looks like there are more cases down south and not so much in the northern part of the country. Kerala, in fact, has been really proactive in testing and treating and tracking all the cases. So it's one of the states that has handled the COVID outbreak really well. So in absolute figures, the number of cases in Kerala and say Maharashtra may be more. I think it's safe to say that these two states really handle the COVID outbreak far better than any other state in the country right now. That being said, I would just like to reiterate, you are right, we should not stop talking about COVID at all. In fact, we should urge people to get the vaccine, and because that is the only way to fight the pandemic right now, and of course wear a mask and practice social distancing. Are there any more questions for me about any of the stories that I have done? If you want, I can speak a little bit about some of the stories I have done if you want, and we can just wrap this up after that. I can talk about a little bit about my experience reporting in Punjab. I was in Punjab during the first wave and during the second. As a reporter, as a budding reporter, I'm very new to this. I've only been doing this for 2 years. The first wave and the second wave, you really saw the entire system collapse during the second wave. Like during the first wave, it was a lot of unknown, and all the people were far more cautious then, not stepping out of the house. The lockdown was really strict, curfew was really strict. Not only was it being followed properly, it was being implemented properly also. So the first wave was really a lot of, seeing empty streets, empty houses, empty lanes and empty things. So that empty markets. So my coverage of the first wave was essentially about how, Punjab's industries have been impacted because of the lockdown, because say in Ludhiana, it's a huge industrial area. So many factories are there and they were all shut down because of the lockdown. Nobody is functioning. People lost out on so much business. And even then people, the company adapted to the situation and started making PPE suits. So that was one way, of how people were dealing with the COVID outbreak and the lockdown in a more positive way. Another story that I did was I followed the police around the entire day, essentially seeing how they were implementing curfew, the issues they would face if people cooperate or not, what happens when they don't cooperate, how do they, tackle that issue. But the second time around, it was just a lot of grief surrounding everybody. The entire, it was just a fight to live, and everybody was so desperate to get a bed, to get, access to oxygen. So the second wave was really, it was also extremely terrifying for me. That is the one time I was really scared to go on ground and report, because by then you knew enough about the virus. You knew how dangerous it was. We knew the Delta variant was spreading. We knew how fast it was spreading, how, quickly people were falling sick. So as a reporter, even though I have to do my job, I was also really terrified of stepping out on the field. And like my second coverage was starkly different in that sense. So I think we should wrap this up here. I don't think there are any more questions. Once again, thank you to all our subscribers for joining this interaction. I hope you guys heard something of relevance or importance from what I said and all the experiences that I've had. And thank you so much for subscribing to The Print. Your support really means a lot to us. And it is the only way that reporters like me can be, outside Delhi, can be in other cities and other states covering stories and bringing to you from across the country. So once again, thank you so much for that. And we hope that you really like the work that we do and you subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, and keep a track of all the work that we do. Thank you so much.